Did you know that in 2016, Iran was the first country to ban Pokemon Go? Now, you might not remember that, but that's okay, because today we look at the top 100 things only true OGs of Pokemon Go would know, like the Magikarp hat, which was the first ever cosmetic item in-game, released during the 2017 Water Festival events in March. Baby Pokemon were released for the first time ever back in December of 2016 during the holiday event, and they gave players a whole new and exciting reason to hatch eggs. It was a really fun time to be playing. There's no topping how hyped it was watching the initial Pokemon Go release trailer for the first time. Especially if you hadn't played the game yet, seeing the possibility of Pokemon in real life was incredible. And don't get me started on that Mewtwo tease at the end. Eggs didn't always hatch how they do now. Back in the day, they had a completely different animation that was much simpler. You used to be able to trade shadow Pokemon, which allowed players to even get lucky shadow Pokemon, which now is impossible to do. Did you know that shiny Gyarados was released in the wild before its Mega was released? Nowadays, in order to find a wild evolved shiny, it typically has to have its Mega available. But back in January of 2020, that wasn't the case. To celebrate Lunar New Year, wild shiny Gyarados was available to catch. When Pokemon Go first came out in 2016, you could use HTML code to italicize or bold the name of your Pokemon. So if you have one of these in your account, it's considered big rare because you can no longer do that anymore. Back in the day, the most exciting thing ever was finding a rare wild spawn, like a Dragonite or a Lapras. People would sprint for their chance at one of these incredible Pokemon, and it always made for amazing video moments.
Oh my god, there it is! Woo! Found the second Dragonite of the night. Oh, got it! On the 65! What's the CP? Okay, let's see, let's see. Let's see it? No. Yeah. Okay, alright, CP.
Alright, we're seeing.
69 Pokemon. 22.
Oh, there you go, dude.
Dragon Pulse, let me appraise it.
It's the same one.
It's decent. Oh, hell yeah.
Right now, to use a charge attack, you just press the button. But for OGs in the early days, players had to press and hold the screen for the attack to go through. Team Go Rocket was first released in Pokemon Go in July of 2019, and they changed the game forever. They became a new exciting reason to run around and battle and catch new powerful Pokemon. And even today, Shadow Pokemon remain as some of the most meta-relevant in the game. In October of 2016, the first player in the world to hit level 40 did it, which was the max at the time. His name was Jimmy Pitts, and he did this in a record-breaking 3 months. You used to be able to earn 100 Pokecoins per day. In 2017, the Pokecoin grind was much different than it is now. You basically earned 1 Pokemon for every 1 hour one of your Pokemon was in a gym. Have tons of Pokemon in tons of gyms across your city, and you're gaining Pokecoins pretty fast, up to 100 per day. Also in 2017, we had raid battles released for the first time. This was a game-changing mechanic that was really fun to use. Even just battling random bosses like Croconaw was a rush. Mew was the first ever mythical Pokemon we saw released in Pokemon Go, which happened way back in March of 2018 through the Mythical Discovery Special Research. If you played back in 2017, you'll never forget the fateful day in February when the entire Johto generation was released, including crazy rare wild spawns like Typhlosion. It was easily one of the most exciting days in all of 2017 Pokemon Go. The original Pokemon Go loading screen with Gyarados coming out of the water is burned into the back of all of our brains until the end of time. In the OG version of gym battles, you could have up to 10 Pokemon in a gym at a time, which made early gyms so much more difficult to battle. Appraising Pokemon is one of the biggest parts of Pokemon Go today. But back in 2016, you literally couldn't find the IVs, which makes it an absolute miracle if you have a 2016 100% IV Pokemon. There used to be a small map at the bottom of a Pokemon's information that showed exactly where that Pokemon was caught. Togetic was once one of the rarest spawns in the game, and notoriously impossible to catch. It was rumored to have under a 1% base catch rate, and was harder to catch than legendary Pokemon are today. So for players back in the day, finding one did not mean they were catching it, and in most cases, they did not. Pokemon Go's official legendary release trailer was epic. The idea of finally catching extremely strong legendary Pokemon was on everyone's mind back in 2017. And amazing Pokemon like Ho-Oh, Lugia, and the legendary birds were shown off in the video. It would be a while until all these Pokemon would be released, but it was still super exciting to see. Charge moves used to have tons of bars, not just the normal 3 that we have today. This made charge moves pretty spammy and a bit complicated. After Pokemon Go was launched in 2016, there were serious problems with the tracking system. We all remember it, it was a pain. And eventually the feature was locked into what's called the 3-step glitch, which basically made every Pokemon on the nearby stay at 3 footsteps instead of go down to 1 footstep if you happen to get closer to the spawn. EX raids were introduced into the game as a way to release super powerful powerful Pokemon like Mewtwo. You would have to raid specific gyms that were EX eligible, then you'd get an invite for an upcoming raid. Other players would also get that same invite, and everyone would show up at a specific time to take it down. It was honestly super fun and a really cool way to engage and connect and meet your local community, and also get some cool Pokemon along the way. In May of 2019, a random summer snooze event happened that spawned a sleeping Snorlax all over the world. It was lying down on the map, which was so cool. But once you caught it, it woke up and there was no longer a sleeping Snorlax in your inventory. June of 2018 saw one of the biggest updates ever in the game, trading. And if you played before then, you played in a world before trading Pokemon was even a thing. So when this feature came out and players were finally able to swap Pokemon they had caught with other people, it was a really exciting time. And fun fact, the trade button includes an Eevee and a Pikachu because the trading feature dropped at the same time as Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu. When the Research Breakthrough Box was first introduced in 2018, players could catch legendary Pokemon with it, which also included shiny legendaries. This was a truly epic time in the game. One of the rarest Pikachu ever came out in October in 2018, and if you played then, you're lucky. Fragment Hat Pikachu spawned for only 2 days as part of a promotional event with a Japanese streetwear designer. Only extremely lucky players were able to catch this shiny. During Pokemon Go Fest 2019, Shiny Abra was accidentally released, and it made Pokemon Go headlines. Players who were lucky enough to be there were able to catch this new shiny early, long before anyone else in the world was. TMs weren't introduced into Pokemon Go until June of 2017. So if you evolved the Pokemon and got a certain move on it, you were stuck with that move, which was incredibly frustrating because it would make a possibly great Pokemon suck. Like imagine grinding for 2 months to finally get your Dragonite and you get the worst moves on it and can't even use it. That happened a lot back then. It pained us all. Medals in your profile used to look very different. Now they're beautiful, shiny, and sparkly, which was not the case back in the day. When you encountered a Pokemon, you used to have to press a bag button to access your balls and berries. It wasn't until a while after that Niantic released the ability to use either the ball or berry button when in the catch screen, but only real OGs remember that backpack button. Remember this kid, the I play Pokemon Go every day kid? Only lucky people forgot how this song goes. For others, including myself, it remains burned into the back of my brain. Back before you could efficiently track Pokemon, there were websites dedicated to finding rare spawns. You would be able to look on a map of your surrounding area and see the spawns of everything, including crazy things like Dragonite. Before the pandemic, players had to walk to be able to battle in the Go Battle League. You heard that right. In order to unlock your battles for the day so that you could attack, you had to walk up to 5 kilometers. And speaking of walking, Pokemon Go's first ever Easter egg was discovered back in 2016. If you walked away from the 3 starter Pokemon 3 times when playing the new account, Pikachu would spawn on the map alongside them, which allowed players to catch Pikachu as their first Pokemon rather than the 3 starters. When walking around looking for Pokemon in 2016, a common strategy was to look for rustling of green leaves on the map, which was always an exciting sight because it meant you might have a Pokemon there, but sometimes, a lot of the times, you didn't. Dratini was super rare back in the day, and they also nested. Currently Pokemon nest, but Dratini do not. But back in 2016 they did, and it was a really big deal. If you knew of a nearby Dratini nest, you were most likely there all the time, like how I was with my friends at what we called Dratini Park. AR photos used to only work during a Pokemon encounter. You literally couldn't take an AR picture of a Pokemon unless you found it in the wild. And the risk of doing this is the Pokemon could easily flee while trying to take a picture of it. In 2016, we could not complete the Pokedex, no matter how hard we tried. Certain key legendary Pokemon like Mewtwo hadn't been released yet, and it wouldn't be out for years. So players had to be okay with completing most of the Pokedex, not all of it, which was hard. Transferring Pokemon used to happen very slowly and one at a time. Only real OGs remember transferring Pokemon one by one by one, rather than just mass selecting and transferring now. It was very annoying back then. Armored Mewtwo was released in 2019 and 2020 and was one of the rarest legendaries in the world. Most players transferred theirs when they caught them, not knowing they'd never return. Only OGs have these in their account. In the old gym system, Blissey used to be queen. It was everywhere, and typically 10 in the same gym, which was probably the most annoying part of OG Pokemon Go. Pokemon once had what's called cutesy animations for a small stretch of time that was very welcome. Basically, these were cool animations when encountering Pokemon in the wild, and each Pokemon had its own unique animation. For some reason, they took this feature away, so only OGs were able to enjoy it. If you happen to see a Porygon or a Chansey on your nearby, you'd stop what you're doing and sprint for it, which is funny because nowadays these aren't even considered rare. If you played the first Community Day back in January of 2018, you were part of the game's history. Community Community Day has become the most popular event in the game ever, and it all began with Pikachu in 2018. If you wanted to check your Pokemon's IVs back in the OG days, you had to read through several pages of dialogue from your team leader. The IVs were basically hidden in a coded message that you had to either write down or memorize, trying to figure out if your Pokemon was any good or not. In March of 2018, the first ever shiny legendary was released, Shiny Lugia, and people rushed from gym to gym to get this. When the game originally came out, all the eggs actually looked the same. The only way to tell a 2-kilometer egg from a 10-kilometer egg apart was by clicking in on them and seeing how many kilometers they would take to hatch. In 2016, the Pokemon Go theme song, Gotta Catch 'Em All, became the #1 theme song on Spotify. If you caught a shiny Mew during the Kanto Tour event, you caught Pokemon history. This is because this shiny Mew was the first ever shiny Mew in Pokemon history that was released worldwide. Before remote raids were a thing, we had to walk or run to every single raid. See a rare legendary raid on your nearby that you desperately need, but there's only 10 minutes left on the timer? Get sprinting. There used to be a claim coins button to get your daily Pokecoins, instead of the current system that gives you your Pokecoins once your Pokemon is knocked out of its gym. There was a grandpa that went viral for using 64 iPhones to grind Pokemon Go. Every OG player has found a super rare Pokemon in the wild, like a Lapras, and ran out of balls trying to catch it. This is mainly because back in the day, catch rates were super low for rare Pokemon, and there weren't golden raspberries to help catch them. Also, most people hadn't completed the platinums on their badges, which brought the catch rates down. To track Pokemon in 2016, players had nothing but footprints on their nearby. 3 footprints meant the Pokemon was far away, 1 footprint meant it was close, and this feature didn't really last long enough and was quickly removed after launch. When Shellos was released in 2019, it was accidentally released globally when it was meant to be a regional, so lucky OG players were able to catch a glitched Shellos with the incorrect location tag. You used to be able to battle gyms in AR mode. If you remember this guy with the Pokemon Go Halloween costume, you're definitely an OG. Certain Pokemon had legacy moves that were released back in the day that never came back. Nowadays, you can elite TM these moves onto most Pokemon, but before those were released, the only way to get these OG moves was by trading someone who played at the time that they were released. In 2016, the Pokemon Go tracking system was completely shut down for months. This is because it basically broke and they needed time to fix it, but for a minute, there was literally no way to track Pokemon nearby you. The first Pokemon Go Fest in 2017 was something players will never forget. Why? It literally didn't work and was an utter failure. Years ago, nearly all Pokemon got a huge CP rework, meaning every Pokemon had its CP changed either a little bit or a lot of it. For many people, this was super confusing because they logged into essentially new Pokemon. In February of 2017, the first ever regional Pokemon was released, Corsola. All OG players will never forget this infamous servers are down screen that plagued the first year of the game. Good times, right? Old gyms used to allow players to put multiple of the same Pokemon in them, which meant players could put up to 10 Blissies in a gym, which was hell. Before IV checking was a feature, the only way for a player to figure out their Pokemon stats was by taking screenshots and uploading it to third-party websites, which was a huge pain. You used to be able to use special characters in the names of your Pokemon, and plenty of people created super fun and customized names for theirs. Pokemon Go's first ever event happened in October of 2016, and it was incredible. The OG Halloween event, which featured the first ever in-game bonus and some incredible wild Gengar spawns. How can we not forget the most iconic pop culture Pokemon Go reference moment of all time?
But I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
In March of 2019, 2 new shinies came out that would change things forever, Solrock and Lunatone. These were the first ever regional shiny Pokemon, which would become some of the rarest in the game. After completely shutting down for the first few months of the game's launch, tracking finally returned in November of 2016 to the system that we all still have today with Pokestops. There used to be literal Stampedes for rare Pokemon like Gyarados and Dragonite spawns. The world's first tour event happened in February of 2019 and highlighted the Kanto region. It was an iconic event that you were lucky to have played. Back in my day, you used to have to power up Pokemon 1 power up at a time, instead of the current system where you just click and drag how much CP you want. There was an AR catch trick that tons of players used to use that would basically bring up your catch rate if you got super close to a Pokemon without it running away. The world's first in-person event in Pokemon Go happened in Japan in 2017 with the Lapras Outbreak event, featuring spawns of Lapras everywhere. The first ever Mewtwo was released in Yokosuka, Japan in August of 2017, and would become one of the most famous moments of my YouTube channel. Pokemon Go's old item shop used to have absolutely incredible deals, bundles that were actually worth buying, not like the garbage that we have today. Santa Hat Pikachu in December of 2016 made Pokemon Go history by becoming the first ever costume Pokemon released. So if you happen to have one of these in your account, that's a really cool thing. In September of 2018, Meltan spawned in the wild during a community day. This was unheard of, especially since the Pokemon wasn't even released yet. But to everyone's surprise, once players caught this Pokemon, it turned into Ditto, which was a nice little troll by Niantic. GoFest Yokohama in August of 2019 became the last in-person event for 3 whole years due to a global pandemic. Clone Pokemon released for the first time back in 2020 as part of a short event. These included Charizard, Venusaur, Blastoise, and Pikachu, and they never came back. Zarude was released in October of 2021 as part of the Secrets of the Jungle event, and it also never came back. If you happened to play back then and caught one, you were super lucky. Shiny Magikarp and Gyarados changed the entire course of Pokemon Go back in March of 2017. They were released as the first ever shiny Pokemon, and the game would never be the same after. In May of 2018, the game was filled with random large tall trees. Alolan Executor was released for the first time to promote the new upcoming Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee games, and it spawned everywhere and was honestly hilarious looking. In April of 2018, during the Kanto Celebration event, the raid pool changed. This is important because it was the first time ever the raids changed for a specific event. During the Eggstravaganza event of April 2017, players were given an epic 50% off lucky eggs. If you played back then, you were lucky. Super Incubators are some of the most important premium items in the game, and they didn't exist until September of 2017, which is crazy to think about. Hatching eggs was a long process back in the day. At one time or another, we've all set Magikarp as our buddy to walk for candy to get to Gyarados, which was the first ever 400 candy evolution released in Pokemon Go. It was a struggle to evolve that. We all went through it. Gyms used to not have a lock when they were defeated, meaning after you beat a gym, the same team that you just took it from could snipe it back from you if you weren't quick enough. For a long time, the last Premier Ball in a raid was a 100% guaranteed flee, which was a weird glitch that lasted for just too long, but was always kind of funny and became a huge community meme for a while. When the game first came out, the only efficient way to grind XP and level up was by catching as many Pidgey as you could possibly find, dropping a lucky egg, and evolving them all. Only real ones remember the mass evolution XP grind. It was an unreal time in human history when you could look outside at people walking around, and if they were on their phones, you could guarantee they were playing Pokemon Go. Everyone was playing it. 10-kilometer eggs are reserved for the most exclusive Pokemon, which is why it's so surprising that Eevee used to be inside of them. Back in the day, we would walk 10 full kilometers with no super incubator to hatch an Eevee, which was honestly super rare back then. The first legendary raids and legendary Pokemon came to the game during the week of Pokemon Go Fest 2017. These raids spawned as a surprise in the park and after the event was over, then spread into the city where players took over. It was an incredible memory. During an early Christmas event, players were able to spin a Pokestop and get 1 free incubator once per day for the entire month of December. For a super clever April Fool's Day prank in 2018, Pokemon Go changed all of the in-game sprites of Pokemon to their 8-bit versions, which was such a sick event and one I wish they'd bring back. You were once able to train at your own gyms, meaning battle your own team's Pokemon, which is what the Ace Trainer Medal was originally for, but has since been repurposed. As a way to apologize for the failure of Pokemon Go Fest 2017, Niantic gave all players that attended a free Lugia. In 2016, a player reported they had an Articuno in their account. Many people thought this was fake until Niantic responded. This player actually got an early legendary Pokemon, which Niantic removed from their account and replaced with a Pidgey. That's a fair trade. If you're a Pokemon Go OG, tell me what you remember in the comment section below. Thank you for watching today's video. We'll see you in the next one.